Good afternoon. I'm Kay Jacobson, the History Coordinator of Ramsey County Library, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the popular ongoing presidential series created by historian J.B. Andersen. Today's talk is the first in the series, focusing on James Madison, our fourth president, and it's sponsored by a longstanding cooperation between the Ramsey County Libraries and Osher Lifelong Learning Institute of the University of Minnesota. So, without any further ado, I'd like to turn things over to our speaker, J.B. Andersen.
All right, thank you. Great, we're ready to begin. I have an opening remark. I was diagnosed a week ago last Friday with influenza A or B. I still am coughing, sneezing occasionally, so I may need to take a break or interrupt you with a throat clearing. So good. Thanks for understanding. Today we are doing James Madison. This will be a total of 6 sessions. Madison was born on 16 March of 1751, died on 28 June of 1836. He was 85 years, 3 months, and 2 weeks old. Nice ripe old age, especially in a period when there was no penicillin or modern medicine even. James is the most common name for United States presidents. There have been a total of 6. Madison is the first. His successor was James Monroe. Then in the 1840s, James K. Polk, 1850s, James Buchanan, and in the 1880s, James Garfield, and Jimmy Carter in the 1970s. So there's pictures of all 6 of these Jameses that account for about 12% of all presidents' first names. Let's take a look at the jobs, vocations, accomplishments, desires. What was I going to do with my life under James Madison? This is just simply a lengthy list so that you can see that he did a tremendous amount of government service. Statesman, diplomat, expansionist of the United States. He's considered a founding father, a president. He wrote much of the Constitution, known as the father of the Constitution. To get the Constitution accepted, a group of 3 men, including Madison, wrote and had published in newspapers around the 13 colonies the Federalist Papers. This was an argument for a strong federal government. The articles have all been placed into book form and have been in continuous publication ever since. He's a co-founder of the Democratic Party, 5th Secretary of State, served in the Virginia House of Delegates, Continental Congress member. Continental Congress was setting up the U.S. government. He is involved in the American Revolution, served under the Articles of Confederation. The Constitutional Convention met, and he was a member of that convention. Served in the House of Representatives, was an advisor to George Washington, and was a main force behind a Bill of Rights that many wanted included in the body of the Constitution, but was included among the first 10 amendments instead, which is somewhat dangerous because they can then be amended. So anyway, this is quite a lengthy and impressive history for a person who served in the United States government from its very beginning, and an amazing and lengthy record. Oh. Early life, let's take a look at his birth, home, etc. He was born in Belle Grove, Virginia. You can see here it's on the far eastern coast of Virginia, on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. It's that red county that you see there, and with the black arrow pointing toward it. His family had been in North America since the 1600s. They were not a Mayflower family, but came very early from England into the 13 colonies. His family of origin, there were a total of 12 children, 8 boys, 4 girls. Only half survived to adulthood. Back in this period of time, about half of all children died by the age of 10, usually from a communicable disease. Another 40% were dead by the age of 40, usually due to bad teeth that really compromised their immune systems. And other diseases came along and they were easily found death as a result. So this is not unusual. I mean, it sounds horrible in this day and age to lose half of your children, but it was common in the 1700s and into the 1800s also. His father was a tobacco farmer, so a person of wealth. You can see here from the growing up family home of Madison that it is indeed a mansion known as the Mount Pleasant Plantation. And it's a total of 5,000 acres, a gigantic amount of property. 5,000 acres is about 8 square miles. On horseback, this is not a easy amount of territory to cover in a day, impossible even. But this is the home where Madison grew up, and you can visit it. It's a museum. His father owned about 100 slaves, illustrated here in a cruel manner, an overseer, and children being taken away from parents, sometimes sold. His early life and education. He was tutored. That means he didn't go to a school. Schools did exist. Public schools existed. You were in classes with other students. That was not Madison's experience. The family had someone living with them who was a teacher and was probably involved with all 12 or whatever number were still alive at the time, tutoring them. He was very rich, he's not poor, surrounded by these siblings. Education in Madison's day consisted primarily of 3 subjects: geography, and it was very often descriptive geography, meaning what's located where. And languages, most of these early well-educated young men knew several languages, including ancient languages such as Latin. And math was also a primary subject in school. So geography, languages, and math, quite limited compared to the diversity of education today. For college now, you go to a large school. You are surrounded by fellow students. He attended Princeton University, located in New Jersey. Here's the United States, and here's where New Jersey is located. This is a map of the state of New Jersey, and this is the area where Princeton University is located. And this is a copy of that county, and the red area here is within the county where Princeton University is. This is where the campus is located. This was kind of unusual for a person of wealth. They usually went to William and Mary University, which was very early founded university in the state of Virginia. See this peninsula here? Here's a close-up of it. Here's where William and Mary College is located. And this is where most of the children of wealth, almost all, went to college. It was the place to go, not Princeton. Madison was sickly as a young person. In the 1700s, it was thought that diseases were caused by the climate. They weren't caused by little organisms as we know today. Well, what does the climate do? Well, if you live near a swamp and it's sticky and stinky and giving off methane gas, that's a cause of disease, bad smells. Also, climate. Colder areas were bad for people. Oftentimes, a person would get sick in these northern colonies, and they would be sent to Cuba or to Caribbean islands where it was warmer, fresher air, etc. So oftentimes climate, with cold being bad, oftentimes swampy with smells being bad. And William and Mary College was located in a lowland. It was swampy. Madison had been sick through much of his young life. Consequently, he was sent to Princeton, which is in a high place, good air. So that the reason for his not going to William and Mary was what causes diseases in the minds of the 1700s. The American Whig Theosophic Society at Princeton was a group of men who made up the university at that time. These many men would join this particular society, and that term Whig in there, that is a political position. And it was, Whigs were a group of colonists who supported the Revolution. The American Revolution was not supported by everyone living in the colonies. Only by about a third of the population supported the Revolution. Another third were absolutely opposed to it, many of them migrating into Canada, which was British-held territory, where they felt they would have good protection against those in the colonies who supported revolution. The remaining third were uninterested, didn't care. Revolution made no difference to them. They did not take a stand. Theosophic, that term, the American Whig Theosophic Society. Theosophic is a term that means in praise of wisdom. So this was a society with a large group of young men who were members of it at Princeton University, who wanted to be wise. At Princeton, this lots of literary debate occurred. It was a debate-oriented society. Classes would be students who had read something and then would come together and not simply listen to a lecture, but talk among themselves about the positions that they had read about. Aaron Burr was a member of this group with Madison. Here's a quote from Woodrow Wilson. Genius enough to have made him immortal, and unschooled passion enough to have made him infamous. That's Woodrow Wilson's analysis of Aaron Burr, who had a lot of trouble among his fellow founding fathers. So he was, Wilson saying he was certainly a wise person, but of course, most famous for his duel against Alexander Hamilton that he won and killed Hamilton in the duel. But these two gentlemen, Madison and Burr, knew each other as young men. Burr is buried in the Princeton's University Cemetery. Here's a picture of his tombstone area, and the tombstone is well weathered, as you can see, the standing up portion here on the left. But added later is this bronze plaque that gives his dates of 1856 to 1836. Colonel in the Army of the Revolution, Vice President of the United States under Thomas Jefferson, and that particular bronze plaque was placed in 1995, so relatively new addition to the Burr burial place. Madison studied at Princeton, and we talked about languages being very important. Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, and he also studied theology. William Bradford, pictured here, was a friend of Madison's at Princeton. He became the second Attorney General of the United States under George Washington, and he died in office in 1795 at the age of 41. Not uncommon for people to be dying in their 40s, in their single digit ages, 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 roughly, and not unusual for them to be dying about the time they hit their 40s. And William Bradford was a notable person in U.S. history. Madison's university goal was to become a clergyman. Many in the upper northern portions of the United States were educated to be clergymen. People in the South were educated largely to be accountants because they needed to keep track of slaves, the amount of goods that were harvested, what they sold for, etc. Once the Midwest came about, as the United States expanded eastward, education, educators, teachers became a new and vital resource. President of Princeton was John Witherspoon, who's pictured here. He told when Madison declared that he was interested in being a clergyman, the Reverend Witherspoon told him to read about the Enlightenment first. And that really changed things then for Madison, who no longer saw a job in the clergy, but rather a more free-thinking approach to his life, really changed things, these Enlightenment writers. And he was pushed in that direction by a clergyman. The Enlightenment, primary source of authority, people that are in charge of other people, should be reason, not power. Liberty, tolerance for others, for differing ideas was a vital thing among Enlightenment thinkers. And constitutional government, not monarchies, but rather, here are the rules for people, here are the freedoms that people get to share. The upper class is not the only ones that should have rights to freedom and other democratic notions. And another element of the Enlightenment is the separation of church and state. The church had been hand in hand with the state. Together, they wielded a great deal of power. And this had been true right up to and through much of the Enlightenment period. Here's a picture of many of these Enlightenment figures. Benjamin Franklin from the United States, David Hume from England, and Diderot from France, Burke, Goethe from Germany, Kahn, Jefferson, U.S., Voltaire, a Frenchman. These were leading writers, discussers, and proponents of the Enlightenment through Europe and the United States, or the colonies at the time. Enlightenment studies led to Madison becoming secular in nature, not religious. He really made a big change in his life. You go from conservative to being more liberal and open-minded. And it's a radical movement, giving power to the people, as you see here in the graphic. And people are capable of ruling themselves. Quite a radical notion. After college, what happens next to Madison? Madison went home. That his father had that huge plantation. It was a place where he could have a life. What do you do for work when you're an Enlightenment philosopher? He had no job prospects as a result. And he was among the older siblings. And when he arrived back at his father's plantation, he said, well, with the education you have now, why don't you become a tutor to your younger siblings? And here's a graphic of that painting that shows Madison in action with his younger siblings in a nice rural pastoral kind of setting with animals about and tremendous stress, living together and educating each other. Madison started reading law books. There weren't law schools in this day. You studied under an attorney or you read law books, then you were able to become an attorney. And he found the law very interesting. What kind of laws get passed? What do they mean? What do they do for people generally? He never became a lawyer, however. He backed off of it. Height and weight of Madison. This is a big deal. James Madison is the shortest president in United States history. He's 5 feet 4 inches tall. Abraham Lincoln is the tallest. He was 6'4", 12 inches taller than Madison. So little Jimmy. Here is a comparison of weight. Madison was 5'4" and weighed 98 pounds. I'm when I was younger, I could have probably lifted him over my shoulder. Lincoln, 6'4", weighed 170 pounds. Our largest president was William Howard Taft, 1909 to 1913, weighed 335 pounds. Lots of presidents between the Civil War and up until World War I were way overweight. Grover Cleveland also among them. But Taft wins with 335 pounds on average. He went up and down a bit. How about some famous contemporary people who are 5 feet 4 inches tall? Frankie Valli, the singer. Kevin Hart, the comedian. Joe Pesci, actor. Martin Scorsese, director. All these men are 5 feet 4 inches. Michael J. Fox, an actor. Ted Koppel, a newsman, 5'4" inches. Fats Domino, musician, and Scott Hamilton, the figure skater, were both 5 feet 4 inches in height. Next, we're going to talk about Madison and his role during the American Revolution. The graphic shows soldiers with muskets, sort of. During the Revolution, there was a committee of safety. It was a 1774 group. Excuse me. So it actually started ahead of the American Revolution. But there were inklings of revolution before 1776. And so this committee of safety was founded. It's going to protect us against British oversights. The Committee of Safety, which Madison was a member of, favored war against Britain. And they told fellow supporters of revolution that you should start militia groups. So groups were begun with military training in preparation for what they hoped would become a war of independence. Madison was an officer in the Virginia militia. Oftentimes these were state militias, sometimes county militias. There was a Virginia legislature, so the colonies had law-making groups. And Madison ended up during the American Revolution pretty much being an advisor within the state of Virginia. He never saw any action. He was never a soldier, but was a very, very strong supporter of the revolution itself. Now, Council of State during the Revolution. Madison was elected to this Council of State. He had, as a result, he had regular meetings, direct contact with Thomas Jefferson, who at the time was the governor of Virginia. And here they are in pink and red. Articles of Confederation. This is an introduction to what those Articles of Confederation are. They were the document or documents of the American Revolution, and pretty much ruled the situation from 1776 until the adoption of the United States Constitution in 1789. That was 6 years, 1789, 6 years after the Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution. And the United States did indeed become independent. So we have this 13-year period under the Articles of Confederation. Ratification was required by all 13 states. That eventually happened in 1781, although we were being led by those notions from 1776. The Articles of Confederation were replaced by the U.S. Constitution in 1789. Loose-knit ties between the state, a very weak federal government with the states pretty much running things within their own territories and arguing between each other over what should and shouldn't be done along the borders, and with other items such as slavery in particular. These arguments are still with us today. Strong federal government versus states' rights. And we're seeing legislation passed, especially in southern states, that bans things that the federal government has approved. And these are some very recent developments, even over the last couple of weeks. The huge worry among the states' rights people under the Articles of Confederation was to maintain this weak federal government. A strong federal government might end slavery. So it was the South in particular that was opposed to a strong federal government, because you had lots of people in the northern states which were opposed to slavery. And if they gained control of the federal government, they could control slavery or eliminate it. At any rate, the United States of America is now an official title under the Articles of Confederation. Interesting thing is, there was a president of the United States under the Articles of Confederation. There was one elected almost every year. Here's a list of them. Most of them people we've never heard of. First president of the United States, Samuel Huntington, and he just served 132 days. Thomas McKean, John Hanson. John Hanson gets a lot of credit for this year that he spent in office, is a major figure among historians of the Articles of Confederation. And then we go down to number 6, Richard Henry Lee. That's a famous name. The Lee family, Robert E. Lee of the Civil War, for instance, and he served nearly a year as president. And of course, the extremely famous John Hancock, due to his very large signature on the Declaration of Independence, served for 195 days as U.S. president. And then you can see there's 3 more basically unknowns. The break in dates, oftentimes there's some periods there where there was no president. Congress wasn't in session. Congress picked the president, so a new leader couldn't be selected if somebody resigned and Congress wasn't in session. So for instance here, November 3rd to February 2nd, there was about a 3-month period there where there was no president of the United States. So anyway, there's a list of 10 guys. Only a couple of them known to us, famous to us. Articles of Confederation, there were concerns about this. Madison didn't sign the Articles of Confederation. Both he and George Washington were outsiders. They had some concerns. Let's take a look at 5 major concerns. The United States was near collapse. The strength of Great Britain was very apparent within the colonies, and they were concerned about that. What would happen to the colonies? They were concerned that states had too much power. If states were allowed to decide things individually, can you imagine the sorts of crap that might take place? And Washington and Madison were very concerned about states' rights. Although Washington was a Southerner and a large slave owner. Federal government, they said, could not regulate commerce. You should leave businesses alone. Inflation was very high at the time, and that was a concern. And they thought that was due to federal government attempting to regulate commerce, or the possibility of that. They felt there was too much money in print. Most of that money that was printed was controlled by states and private banks. States would issue currency, wasn't good in the next state over. Private banks would issue currency. You leave an area surrounding a bank whose money you had, and nobody wanted to honor it. So money was a major problem. And of course, a strong federal government could have money that was acceptable throughout a nation. This was mostly coined money, of course. Federal government couldn't levy taxes. That was a concern. How are you going to pay for the Revolutionary War debts that had accrued? The states had all spent money supporting the Revolutionary War. Now they had debts as a result, and the war had been won. If there was a strong federal government, they could pay off those debts by levying taxes. Might be a greater burden to the states to do that. And of course, some states had a much higher debt than other states did. And fifth and finally, states were arguing among each other. Where's our border? What's our territory? What can you do? Why we want to move your people out of our territory? There are too many people within our state who support the state next door. Taxes were an issue. What if somebody owned land that crossed a border between a couple of states? And who taxes them? They get double taxed? What about trade between the states? At one time, shipping cotton from Alabama up to Boston, where there was a harbor and it could be sold and shipped to England, you would have to pass through 6 states, each one of them saying, well, you owe us money for transporting these goods across our state. So it just became a gigantic tax problem, difficulty, a trade problem. And what about the soldiers who had fought during the American Revolution? Do they deserve a pension of some kind? Who pays it? What state? Some of them served in a couple of different states. It all became very confusing. So Washington and Madison were concerned about these issues if a weak federal government were the outcome. Well, let's take a look at the 13 major elements in the Articles of Confederation. SIP. Number one, the name of the new nation will be the United States of America. That was established in the Articles of Confederation. Interesting, you know, there's lots of states' rights arguments being made, and yet the name that was agreed to was United, had United in the title. States have all the powers not listed in the Articles of Confederation. So if it isn't in here, you get it. States. Each state must protect the other states. So let's say England decides, okay, we're going to come over there and we want all that cotton that's being grown in Georgia down here, and it's got a port, and so we're just going to take over as much of these cotton growing areas as we can because we're a gigantic textile industry. And if that happens, the other colonies, the other states in the Articles of Confederation must come to your defense. People can travel between states. What do you do with somebody who commits a crime, but they're from another state? They commit a crime in your state. You don't want them living in your state when they're released. You want to return them to the state they came from. Get out of here. So can people travel between states, and with what restrictions? Or is it open? One of the elements was criminals must be returned to the states where they committed their crimes. And that's confusing to me, but anyway. Each state, you get one vote in Congress. You might have 7 delegates from your state in the US Congress, which is a very weak body, but each state gets 1 vote. Today, it's based on population. You know, Minnesota's got 8 representatives. You get 1 representative for roughly every 700,000 residents that you have. It started out once we became the United States with every 50,000 residents, you get a representative in the House of Representatives. In the early 1900s, Congress had gotten huge. It had gone from 80 to 100 representatives. It was up to 435. The United States Congress passed legislation that said you can't go over 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. Consequently, the population within each congressional district grew. Today, I guess there is a congressional district with as few as about 550,000 people. There are some with as many as 750,000 people. So a tremendous increase. And again, based on population. So California has 50 some representatives. Minnesota has 8. Wyoming has 1. You have to run across the whole state to be in the House of Representatives, just like a senator has to run across the entire state. And there's, I think there's 3 states like that that don't have a population of, 700,000 people. 6 of 13 elements. Central government will negotiate treaties. It's going to be in charge of foreign affairs. The states have to be in charge of an army. States need to maintain soldiers. You need to train them. Part of the Articles of Confederation. So warfare, preparation for warfare is a state responsibility. States get to choose military leaders. So you can be General Washington, but you're not in the United States Army. You're in the Army of Virginia. And each state would have generals, et cetera, et cetera. Then when they start to come together, who's in power, who makes decisions? What if there's an attack on the entire United States of some kind? So the whole states' rights thing becomes quite argumentative among many people, especially in terms of military leadership. States, they have to raise funds to aid the central government. Central government can't tax anything or anybody. So the states will tax people and then support the federal government. Here's a very early printed paper money form. It's not a coin. There were thoughts that, you got to have silver or gold in the coin. It's got to be worth something. People started saying that's unfortunate. It requires that there be gold or silver in the state itself. It becomes difficult. We will honor paper money. This particular piece of paper money, you can see, is issued by the state of Maryland. Yep. And it's a $1 bill. A lot of money at this time. Only the central government can declare war. And it can assign ambassadors. Again, it's in charge of foreign affairs. So the central government sends ambassadors to foreign countries. They report back to the central government, who shares information then with the states. And when it comes to warfare, remember, the states were tied together. You have to protect each other if one state is attacked. So this federal government would be a place where they'd say, okay, this is war. Everybody come to the aid of Georgia or whatever. Number 10 of the 13 major elements of the Articles of Confederation. When Congress is not in session, a committee of states will take charge of the central government. Again, a states' rights kind of platform here. Congress doesn't meet year-round. It doesn't to this day. And when Congress isn't in session, something happens at the federal level. What do? Well, a committee of states, that's the title, is formed. And these members from each state will sit and decide what to do next, since Congress itself isn't in session. Canada can join the United States. Isn't that nice of us? Canada was British. We defeated the British. We now have the Articles of Confederation. And of course, the thought is, boy, the Canadians you'd think would want to join us, get rid of Britain, etc. And of course, that did not happen. But it was an element of the Articles of Confederation that we would like to see that happen. Canada forming itself into states and joining the United States. And here's a picture from the time, a map showing many of the states. Look at North Carolina stretching way westward, ends up becoming Tennessee, parts of it. The United States will pay off war debts. Okay, here now you got in the Articles of Confederation that the federal government will assume the debts that the states incurred during the American Revolution. And many states' rights advocates argued for this. So much for their states' rights arguments. They didn't want to have to pay off the debt. So anything they don't want to do, well, then the federal government can take care of that. And paying off the debts of the Revolution was one of the major elements of the Articles of Confederation for the central government. Here is another paper money item, and it's issued by a bank in the state of Connecticut. Here you can see. So, and this is an actual document. Look, printed on pretty flimsy paper, and got a hole punched in it, etc. 13th and final, the Articles of Confederation can be changed. You can amend them, but it takes a unanimous vote. All 13 states must approve any changes within the Articles of Confederation. Once the U.S. Constitution was being ratified, we said 9 states need to approve. 9 of the 13 need approval, because they figured for sure all 13 would not even come close to such a approval rating. Madison's role in the Articles of Confederation. He served in the Second Continental Congress. Continental Congress is what the Congress was called under the Articles of Confederation, and Madison was a member. He had 2 major concerns. He wanted greater religious tolerance stated in the Articles of Confederation. Let's amend them and let's get religious freedom in there. And see this coexist with all sorts of religious icons in it. So he wanted freedom of religion, not tolerance of religion. So you could have a state-supported religion, but they have to be tolerant of other religions and allow them to exist. That's not what Madison wanted. He wanted freedom of religion, no state-supported religion. Instead, any religion, all religions, none of them at a central point. So this was in response to the state of Virginia that had established the Anglican Church as official. The Church of England had been official within the colonies. Once the Revolution started, that was given up, and the Church of England came to be called in the United States the Anglican Church. and it's very high church, like the Catholic Church is. So it basically was the same body in the U.S. as the Church of England, but the name was changed because England no longer controlled the colonies. So now it's the Anglican Church. And yet even that term Anglican refers to British. Economic problems were a concern of Madison. He wanted this federal government. They need to have money. They can't just be dependent on the states giving them money. So if they could levy taxes on imports, so anything coming into the United States from England in particular, which was the major world trade partner and a major trade partner with the United States, even though we had won a war against them, there were many in the U.S. that wanted us to really side with England because of economic reasons, even though the French had helped us during our revolution against the British. There was a whole nother group that included Thomas Jefferson, who wanted the United States to align itself with France, which was having its own revolution now, and and getting rid of their king, their monarchy. So anyway, we need money for this new federal government. So all this stuff that's coming into the United States, in particular from European countries, we can say, well, it's worth $100 and there's a 1% tax on that. And that goes to the federal government. So generally speaking, what Madison wanted was the federal government to be able to collect money, to raise money. And of course, the slave states in particular were very worried about this because money is power. Madison had the support of Washington again on these issues, but they failed to pass. Nobody was interested, in particular states that were worried about the federal government getting too much power. Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Paris ended the United States Revolution. Let's take a look at it. Ended the American Revolution. This is the signatory document of the American Revolution. Madison wanted three things. We'll talk about those in a minute. Here's David Hartley's signature. He was in the British Parliament, signed for England. Yep, we lost the war. Here's John Adams, was a signatory on the Treaty of Paris, as was Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay. John Jay became the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court and was a founding father. Here's the signatory page of the document. And this is this bottom part here where you can see the signatures. What three things did Madison want in the Treaty of Paris? He wanted close relationships with France, not England. They were our ally, already talked about them. The French Revolution had not yet started. It's nearly a decade off yet, but France had been a major supporter of the United States, and they blockaded the escape of British from the U.S. They blockaded ports. That's what really won the American Revolution. But siding with France is not what happened. We ended up siding with Britain. It became an economic issue, much better trade partner. better for US capitalists to be siding with England than with France, which was not a great industrial place. It was a farming place. England was having an industrial revolution, something that didn't happen for another 100 years in the United States. Tremendous boom economically between 1865 and 1900 in the US that led to the development of industries. Second item, the United States owned all the land east of the Mississippi River. That's not included in this treaty, but here you can see in the light green, here's the Mississippi River. And the United States claims all this land is ours, doesn't belong to Britain. Britain had forts all around the Great Lakes here in these, what became Wisconsin and Michigan and even New York State. So light green, everything east of the Mississippi River is claimed by the United States in Madison's hope. But it wasn't included in the treaty. The right to navigate the Mississippi River was included in the treaty. This blue line is the Mississippi River. Tremendous trade options here, especially getting furs that were trapped in Canada and northern Minnesota. Many would come out this way through Canada. Many would come out this way through the Mississippi River. Certainly, the length of the Mississippi and its mightiness was a major concern to the new United States government, which wanted to be able to have some economic controls further inland from where the 13 colonies or 13 states were indeed located. And this got included in the Treaty of Paris to Madison's satisfaction. After the Revolution, major concerns. We want no official religion. Nobody's going to wear a big hat and say they're in charge. Say, equal rights for all religions. Madison was big time on religious freedom. Anglicans not allowed a toleration stance. They would not become the official church of the United States, tolerating other churches. Instead, they would be just another religion among many religions or religious groups within the United States. The Catholics and the Anglicans, very high church. You can see here from sorts of clothing that they wear and the kind of performance at religious services. Methodism, which became a major movement within the United States, was low church. No official clothing for the clergy, a very low no marching in at the beginning of a religious service. You simply stand up and move to the pulpit, etc. So religious concerns for Madison were at the utmost. Did a great deal of reading after the Revolution. I read about democracies that had been formed in Rome, Roman Empire, and the Greek nations or the Greek city-states during those periods. Of course, they all crumbled and became monarchies. So this reading that he was doing was by and large in preparation for the Constitutional Convention, where a constitution would be written with a stronger federal government and ties between the states. And he wanted to be prepared with arguments for his opinions. Now, Madison, major league title for the guy, father of the Constitution. Let's take a look at it. A beginning, the introduction. Here's Madison in the House of Delegates in Virginia. Here he is standing and speaking. He aided in the writing of a religious freedom document for the state of Virginia. Again, religious freedom meaning no official religion. So the religious freedom document became very important in the writing of the U.S. Constitution. Madison could now say, look, state of Virginia has adopted such a thing. There are lots of people that want this. Your religion should not take power over other religious groups. Concerns about the Articles of Confederation. Here's to all to whom. You know, that's kind of like we the people. That was the opening remark in huge letters in the Articles of Confederation. We're going to talk about the 9 concerns within the Articles of Confederation that aided in leading to them being changed dramatically and the United States Constitution being written and adopted. Lack of unity between the states. States having too much power, arguing among themselves. Here is a picture of a meeting. There you can see George Washington overseeing the meeting. So Madison's first major concern is states are not unified. They need to be unified. There's too much fighting between the states. Second item, we have a weak federal government. That's a bad thing. We need a strong federal government. We are part of a world of nations. We need to be able to deal with that world of nations as a unit, not as 13 separate notions. No controls over the states. States can do whatever they want. Madison called it excessive democracy. And he said that needs to be changed. It's just too much local control. It just is not going to work. Paper money. Madison saw this as worthless. The Articles of Confederation was using some paper money. The federal government, look down here, federal government did not allow paper money until 1863 under Lincoln as part of the crisis of the Civil War. So several states allowed paper money back in the late 1700s. Madison says this is valueless currency. We can only have coins. They contain precious metals. This was true up to when I was a kid. You know, we all had quarters that had silver in them, for instance, and pennies that had copper in them. And here's a third of a dollar bill from February 17th of 1776, issued by a Philadelphia bank. So what are we going to do about money was an issue. some states denied having diplomatic immunity. And what Madison wanted was you can't charge any diplomat with criminal behavior. That's got to be a national law. In New York City, the United Nations exists. And a delegate to the United Nations is pulled over by New York City police for speeding, and he says, "Hey, I have diplomatic immunity." Okay, so long. And here's a get out of jail free card. So some of the states within the United States under the Articles of Confederation do not allow diplomatic immunity. So you might not like the opinion that's being voiced by some foreign diplomat, so you jail him. Well, we can't have that. Foreign diplomats should be allowed to say and do whatever they want, and not open to criminal charges in a country that they are appointed to by their homeland. Sixth, foreign policy. Foreign policy is a pretty difficult thing to manage when you're a very weak federal government. So stronger federal government, Madison's concern, foreign relations. What about the acquisition of new lands within the United States? Who has a say in settlement? Do the states? Does the federal government? Who gets to divide this new territory up and into what? And which areas are going to have slavery and which aren't? So the concern in the 1780s was here's the Appalachian Mountains. All this stuff west of the Appalachian Mountains. The United States is claiming everything east of the Mississippi River. What happens to all this territory in here? What are these new lands going to be like? And Madison, of course, is saying a federal government should determine that, not state governments. The state of Virginia, located here, state of Virginia claimed that a line of its most northern and most southern border, here and here, should be drawn all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and that will be the state of Virginia. See? So do states get to decide? Does the federal government get to decide? Madison says, go federal. Human rights. Got to minimize majority rule and maximize individual rights. I have had arguments with people, especially about the banning of books. Well, if a majority of people want to ban a book, I mean, that's what the US is based on, is a majority. I mean, whoever wins an election is in the majority. I have to tell them, no, the United States is based on individual rights. The majority may not rule against other individuals. Book banning is a majority or a very strong minority saying nobody can read this book, get it out of the library, or I don't want my kid reading it at the school library. So majority rule means the denial of human rights. Majority will say, no, you can't do that. Individual rights, according to Madison, should be the dominant theme in a new government. Mississippi River, navigation rights, who controls it? Well, the Treaty of Paris resolved that, allowing the United States and England to navigate the Mississippi River here. By the way, if you've never been to the source of the Mississippi in northern Minnesota at Lake Itasca, you can step across the river there. Pretty interesting. For years, we wondered, where did Lake Itasca get its name? And the man who discovered the source of the Mississippi River named it. Finally, decades later, it was realized that he called it Veritas Caput, the true head in Latin. And Veritas, the last four letters, itas. Caput, Veritas, Caput, the first two letters, C-A-Ca, itasca. He took the last syllable and the first syllable of Veritas Caput to get the name Lake Itasca. And at any rate, we're lucky. The Mississippi River is a major source of fresh water, and we're up at the head of it. By the time it gets down to St. Louis, Missouri, the notion is it has passed through 7 human bodies. So we're getting clean water. This is the Mississippi River drainage basin. Look at this. Unbelievable. Just 41% of all the water in the United States drains into the Mississippi River. Just a tremendous amount of creeks and streams and other rivers that end up emptying into the Mississippi. Major source of land drainage. Here's an even more detailed map. Here's what we just looked at. Here's an even more detailed map of drainage into the Mississippi River. I'm not sure how many questions there are. I'm sorry, I would have quit a couple of minutes ago, but I think this might be a good spot to stop. Let's see if there are some questions. And hi.
Let's start with, there's a couple on the Articles of Confederation. One is, it seems like the president during the Articles of Confederation was about equivalent to being Speaker of the House today. Would that be an accurate description?
Yes, I guess. Yeah.
Somebody was just wondering about that. And how many authors were there for the Articles of Confederation?
That I don't know. It was way into double figures.
Okay.
Yeah, many states, some states refused to send any delegates, but they ended up. It took a while, but they ended up getting a quorum. So they were able to write the Articles of Confederation, and then all 13 states adopted them. So there was enough support going around that everybody kind of fell in line.
So definitely committee versus one person being the main author.
Yes.
Okay. And then I take it you're going to get more into Benjamin Franklin's relationship maybe with Madison during talking about the Constitution?
There'll be a bit more on Franklin, but no, this is about
Okay.
this is about Madison. However, what's interesting is the number of people I run into who think that Benjamin Franklin was a president. And he wasn't, but I mean he's got that kind of status. I mean, it was a major player. Of course, he died soon after the Constitution had been accepted. So I don't know. I've often thought I should do something on Benjamin Franklin because he's such a major player, even though it is a president's
Right.
class.
Is it someone was just wondering, since he presided over the Pennsylvania Constant Constitutional Convention, they were wondering if Madison and Franklin had much of a relationship.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple general questions. How long have you been doing your series?
Uh, when I retired, uh, I substitute taught in high school for a year. And then OLLI called me and said, would you like to teach these classes? I had worked at the Humphrey Institute, which is the School of Public Affairs. And I said, yes, I would. And my class, I think, met on Tuesdays then. And and I told them I can still sub in this district I was subbing in, but not on Tuesdays. And then this class became so interesting and exciting and built up quite an audience that the second year I quit subbing. Now it's hard for me to remember the exact year that this started. I have slides and computer information from 2007.
Yeah.
However, I was using transparencies and a projector for at least a couple of years before that. So I
So,
think I've been doing this since 2005. So this is
so
like 19 years
okay.
in OLLI. And then the library joined up several years ago, maybe 10 years ago or something. Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
So, and somebody wonders if you have a website.
No, I don't. And I've often thought that I should. And the amount of time I spend getting ready for class and creating, I'll write up roughly 100 pages on each president. I mean, I've got 250 on Franklin Roosevelt, but I write that up, and then from that information, I create the slides that we've seen here. And that's very time consuming. And I thought after about 17, 18, after I think about 17 years, I got up to Obama and I said, okay, I'm going to start over again. Well, instead of just doing the slides I'd created years before, I ended up adding more material. And so I'm still busy. And I've just never created a website. And however, the library has a website with my lectures in it,
Mhm.
and so does OLLI. And you can go in and you can listen to these. I think you must have started recording them when COVID hit. So I think we maybe have like 5 years worth of my lectures.
Yep.
Yeah, and usually, it's 6 to 12 sessions on each president, 1 to 2 quarters. Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, I have a total of 1 year, 3 quarters of lectures, but none of that was recorded. But anyway, you can go in and watch, uh, you
Previous
know,
sessions. Yeah.
But yeah, thanks. I should do that or have somebody do it for me.
Mhm.
And I could be posting these 100-page,
Slide presentations.
yeah, the documentary evidence. And then on each page, I got 100 pages of text. Then on each page, I add a graphic. So I end up with 120, 130 page item on each president, more on many. One I think has, I mean, what can you do with William Henry Harrison? He was in office 31 days. But the fact is, he has a history. But I think I've got something like 58 pages on him. So a website would allow me to get all that uh, written material
Oh,
as, as well as the slides in there, so people could go through the slides and they could read the written material. So let me
mhm.
think about that. Maybe I can find somebody that can help me set that up. Thanks.
Okay. And then I had somebody wondering, when did Madison first meet Jefferson? Do you have any inkling on that?
No, but I think it was probably when Jefferson was governor of Virginia, before the United States Constitution had been written. And uh, Madison served on a couple committees within the Virginia legislature. That gave him access to Jefferson. Uh, so I would guess probably about the early 1770s. And of course, uh, Madison was only in his 20s in the
Okay.
1770s, So,
And those seem to be the main bulk of the questions. Um,
uh, one thing I guess I'd like to say, sorry to interrupt, is
um,
you can uh, a person could write to me and say, could you send me the slides from this week? I have done that in the past, and I'm able to send out slides. I won't do them in advance of my speaking the stuff,
mhm.
and I have also, for some people, sent them just the text. Here's the first 10 pages of text that were covered this week. So feel free to write to me. Small case, JB as in boy, at comcast.net. What's important in that address is the .net. A lot of people want to do .com. So JB1717 at comcast.net. Thanks.
So, well, I think that looks like everything for today. And thanks everyone for joining us. And we will be looking forward to next week at the same time, same place for our continued look at James Madison.